Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We will be starting with the first talk. The three presenters here is Bjorn Hassler, Teresa Connolly, and Sarah Hennessy. The title of the talk is Orbit and Open Education Resources for Schools, OER for Schools, Supporting Effective Primary and Secondary School Practice through OER. Please.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the welcome. Thanks for coming to the session. You've just heard the title of the talk, and we'll have two projects to talk about, and we'll split that between Teresa and Sarah and myself. I just want to start with some general comments. When we talk about OERs, we often think about the legal freedom that goes with that, the legal aspects of it, the Creative Commons license. But I'd like to make a couple of other points with this that are related more to capabilities, if you're familiar with the capabilities-based approach. And that's a kind of technical freedom to actually do with the OER as you like from a technical perspective. That is to say, I might be given a document, say a printout, that it just has a Creative Commons license onto it, but I can't do very much with it because I can't email it to somebody. Right? If I'm given a file, then that's much easier to share that file. But there's also issues to do with access here. If my OER is on a website that is full of loads of images and lots of CSS and JavaScript, then that website isn't accessible from everywhere in the world because, particularly in the developing world, internet access is much more difficult and much slower than it is from the developed world. So there are aspects here to do with technical freedom. It's not just about the legal freedom of making your OERs available, but it's also about how do I make them available, how flexible is the way in which I make these OERs available. And then there's also a kind of educational freedom, perhaps a cultural freedom with it. That is to say, how much do these OERs support certain approaches in education that promote a kind of freedom around learning, that promote some of the things that we're going to talk about in this talk. Now, a second kind of general comment that is actually related, we haven't got a lot of time to go into this, but it is related to the previous slide, are these three pillars of our project. Often when we think about, so they stand for ICT, Information Communication Technology, Open Education Resources, obviously, but also pedagogy. And we think that these three elements are important pillars, perhaps in any OER project, where it's not just about a resource, and then, well, what do I do with that resource? And I have this resource on my desk. Okay, that's fine. What's the next step? So often there's elements of ICT that might be to do with distributing the resource, or if there's some kind of, if it's an online resource, I access the resource in that way. But there's also questions around pedagogy. What kind of pedagogy do I apply with this resource? How do I use this resource in my actual teaching? So these are three pillars in our project that we'll come back to. Now, about the first project, really the Orbit project, the Open Resource Bank on Interactive Teaching in Science and Mathematics, centers around this idea of a lesson idea. That is to say, a lesson for primary and secondary school. What is the idea in that lesson? What is that lesson about? And how am I going to approach that from a pedagogical perspective? Am I going to use group work? Or am I going to have a very kind of lecturing style and presenting some kind of information in knowledge transmission mode? So this project is all about interactive pedagogies. That is to say, pedagogies that involve group work, whole class dialogue, inquiry-based learning, project work, that sort of thing, and I hope some of you will be familiar with that. And we also couple these lesson ideas with some subject knowledge, because often sometimes teachers are unsure about a particular piece of subject knowledge. And so we have these lesson ideas and we bring them together with subject pedagogy and subject knowledge. And then we bring this into a database, the Open Resource Bank on Interactive Teaching. And there's a lot more in this diagram that I'll just skip over for now. And I'll hand over to Teresa to talk a little bit more about the first of these two projects, the Orbit project itself.
I knew this was going to happen. Right. Excuse me. Thank you. I'm going to sit down because I'd rather do that. So as Orbit was saying, as Bjorn was saying even, he is Orbit at the end of the day. Our open resource bank in interactive teaching focuses on the area of teachers, training schools and other teacher educators who potentially are our end users and who are going to use the resources that we're making available. In addition to that, we're also going to be creating an open course book which is going to be themed in a pedagogical sense with a whole set of open educational resources that again are going to be aimed at the primary and secondary school area. That also includes sixth form level as well. No, that wasn't the right button to press. Ha. So who's Orbit for? As I said, the classroom teachers. They could be subject specialists, they might be heads of department, they might be simply the primary or the secondary school subject specialist. I've just seen someone from a long time ago there. It also is going to be useful for our colleagues who teach in initial teacher education, those in higher education who are learning to be teachers, or being taught how to be teachers. And in that respect also it relates to those who can also do in-service training and do continuing professional development. So in other words, the resources are going to meet the needs of many different people in this broader area. And how are we going to share them? Well, we have set up a wiki, which you'll find actually in your bag. There's a blue sheet of paper which tells you all about Orbit. Shameless self-promotion now. And it's going to enable you to learn a little bit more about where these ideas are coming from for the classroom activities. And as Bjorn mentioned, it's very much focused on the idea of interactive teaching, so it's not the broadcast model. And in addition, it may be with or without ICT, so it's a very broad remit there. And in addition, there are also the teacher education resources, as I alluded to just a few moments ago. I'm not quite sure why this slide was put in, but perhaps my colleague would like to butt in at this stage.
It's just some of the applications that we're using when teaching with ICT. These are some of the things we're looking at, like Scratch and GeoGebra, as well as the Raspberry Pi, which are sort of interesting technology tools that are around for the primary and secondary sector.
Great, thank you. No, that's fine. That wasn't there when I last looked at the presentation. Here's an idea for you of the number of people that we are talking, well, some of the people I should say. This is a selection of the partners we have in the project. Excuse me. As you can see, they're from many different aspects of both higher education and also the primary and secondary levels. We're talking directly with teachers in a selection of local schools and some schools further afield, at the primary level, the secondary level, and also the sixth form level. Obviously, we're also talking with the other major players in the area in terms of teaching resources that may or may not be OER currently, but coming soon, hopefully, as well as our colleagues in the other part of the JISC Phase 3 funding projects, such as DEFT at Sheffield Hallam. So how are we going to achieve these activities? And that's through an ongoing dialogue. As I was saying earlier, we do talk to many teachers and to other teacher educators in other institutions. And through this dialogue, we're locating and creating new resources, as well as adapting existing resources that are made available to us. And we're creating those as interactive lesson ideas. So there's a lot of repurposing going on. And they are related, as I said, to the OER networks, but also to the teaching network. So through the science, technology, engineering and maths network, STEM, for example. And throughout this, we're recording the pedagogical rationale that goes with those lesson ideas. And in addition, obviously, we're going to be tagging the information and seeking permission to use it under a Creative Commons license, the materials, that is. Throughout the project, obviously, we're going to be evaluating what we're doing, but we're also going to be publishing that content. And as I said, there is a reference to the wiki on the blue piece of paper in your bag. This is a very quick snapshot of it. And at the same time, we're going to be looking at how easy it is to use access as well as the educational effectiveness. And that dialogue continues throughout the project with the teachers themselves, because it's incredibly important that it fits their purpose, because they are the end users at the end of the day. So they do inform us very closely, and very vehemently sometimes it has to be said that they do like this or they don't like that. That would work, that wouldn't work. As I was saying, there's a wide variety of resources that are being created, primarily in the science, maths and teacher ed areas. We're also creating slowly a register of those OER providers that can contribute to this project, as well as associating naturally with the search engines and the other aggregate sites. The open course book is coming along nicely, I think it's fair to say, and it will also be a collection of those resources, but under the specific themes that relate to pedagogy. Obviously, a very important part of the project is about dissemination and also about discoverability. And with that in mind, we are linking with a number of different areas through an RSS feed from the wiki itself. And we're offering the contents in a number of different formats in order to enable a wider range of teachers to use them. We're continuing to run workshops with those teachers and partners, and we do have a number of publications planned also to disseminate the information. There have been one or two little issues. I'm sure everybody in the room will recognise each of these in no particular order. Everyone's really busy. It's quite difficult, to be perfectly honest, to track down a busy teacher as well, so that's been a little bit challenging. We have an ongoing controversy over tagging, but less said about that the better, really, possibly at this moment in time. And additionally, it has proven to be a little bit tricky to identify the provenance of some of the materials. Teachers are superb at sharing materials. They're not so concerned about the old copyright issue. So, again, I'm sure you can relate to all of this, but anyway, less about that and more about the many other OER opportunities that my colleague Sarah is going to talk to you about now, but in an African context.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you briefly about another educational, open educational resource, this time adapted for the Zambian context. Again, focused on maths and science and enhanced by interactive uses of ICT. So we've been using resources like the Orbit resources that Teresa and Bjorn have told you about, but in quite a different context to support teacher education and school-based professional development in Zambia. So you'll see the same three pillars supporting this project here. And in this case, we're focusing on mobile technologies and the kinds of collaborative work that those support. The open educational resources, we're looking for known to be effective games and activities, applications that will work at low bandwidth, that will be universally accessible and support learning. And the pedagogy is kind of similar to what has already been alluded to. Again, supporting more interactive forms of pedagogy, using those technologies or working without technology where schools don't have them. Okay, so what we've been doing is working with a number of Zambian teachers and classes and conducting some pilot work, helping them to integrate the new resources and tools into their lesson plans. And from that, we've created a new professional learning resource. And here are some of the components you can see of the resource are shown kind of around this circular diagram. So the kinds of pedagogies that we're including are listed. Here are the actual components, and it focuses quite heavily on a fairly unique set of video footage that we've collected in Zambian classrooms with the teachers we've been working with over the last couple of years who've become interactive in their practice. So we've filmed in some Zambian primary schools. We've also included some other resources, as you can see, audio and textual resources, lesson plans, activities of various kinds. And a key feature is the educator notes, which are designed for teachers or educators working with teachers in the classrooms to help make the materials, well, to guide them through the materials.
Okay, let's talk about it.
Sorry, whoops. I should have just given you a brief introduction before I show that. It's just a small snippet of some of the video resource that we've been using. Okay, it's literally going to be a very small snippet now because I'm having 5 minutes flashed at me. Just to show you the kinds of activities that we might see. These are the sorts of questions, but I'll just show you a tiny little bit of the video.
I haven't seen a zebra before, and I'm asking you to tell me some of the features of the zebra. I haven't seen a zebra before, so I want you to describe a zebra for me.
Okay, sorry. There's been, the video will be embedded in the Prezi, so if anybody wants to see more of it, you can do. These are the kinds of questions that we might ask participants, teachers who are looking at it, to stimulate their thinking and their discussion. The resources will be available in multiple formats, as you can see, and it can be used in different modes. With colleagues is ideal, but also in initial teacher education on your own in various ways. Partners that we're working with are numerous. They include teacher colleges and universities and other NGOs and other organizations. We're currently conducting a one-year trial in one urban, semi-rural school in Zambia, where one teacher is working with his colleagues over time and facilitating use of the materials. That's one of the teacher workshops in that particular school. That's our process of professional development, if you like, or working with the teachers. So a kind of cycle of trialing out new ideas, reflecting on it, refining those ideas, discussing with colleagues, and so on, using the video as a stimulus. We've been doing some recent trials in teacher colleges and universities in Zambia, running workshops where we work with the lecturers first and then they work with the university students. Feedback's been very positive. And these are kind of the outcomes of both the school and the university trials, if you like, where we find that participants come with their own practices, their own experiences that they're sharing with each other. They seem to be more motivated and enjoying what they're doing. And we've certainly seen some changes in practice and mindset in the school context. In the university and lecture context, it's a little early to say, although feedback's been positive. I'm going to skip over this. This is just some of the things that the students who took part in our workshops have said that they've learned about interactive teaching. That's one of the college workshops. A few things about the workshop itself. And finally, just to skip to the conclusions, technology has no agency. So basically the pedagogy here is the driving force. The notion that the same technologies could be used differently in different contexts. And in order to facilitate that process, we need very careful teacher support. So just making resources available, as Bjorn's already alluded to, is not going to have an impact. Finding high-quality open educational resources that are going to support interactive teaching and learning is actually quite challenging. There's plenty of stuff out there, but lots of it is it assumes almost a transmission mode of pedagogy, which is not what we're focusing on. So our question really is, how can this kind of interactive pedagogy be embedded in open educational resources? And the kind of approach we're taking in Orbit, where we have a sort of small pedagogical rationale attached to each resource, is that something that's helpful to teachers? That's a research question for us, something we're looking at. And there may be other ideas, there may be other ways of doing it. Likewise, the new gadgets that are coming out on the market, how do we ensure that their use is purposeful and relevant to learners' own experience and applied to real educational context rather than just used for the sake of it? Okay. Again, the Orbit URL that Teresa referred to also links to the OER for Schools one, so you can access the resource from there. And I'll just finish by putting the wiki up if I know where it is. What is that? Sorry. It looks like a... Okay. Okay, so if anybody has any questions, please do ask. In the meantime, I'll just leave this one. It's the front one. Well, it's one of our units. Just so I can get that onto the screen, just to show you what the material actually looks like. So there's activities, educator notes, videos embedded within it, questions after it, and so on. So, sorry that was a whistle-stop tour, but please do ask questions, or we can provide further information if you like.
Great, thank you very much.